And
Should we do some of our conspiracy theories? Last week, of course, it was suggested that we each pick a conspiracy theory, and then we come and try to convince the others that perhaps there is some validity to that conspiracy theory.
Mm-hmm. And there will be no second guessing in your presentation of the conspiracy.
No.
You will present it as though it is fact. Because
Mine is fact.
That's the point. Yes, that you have to. Mine are both facts too. They're facts.
Before I start mine, I just want to say I'm gonna present it as if it's fact. It's not a fact.
You don't have to hedge these things. And Kyle, you're giving away your conspiracy. What is it? Or would you want to lead, or what do you want to do? Who would like to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
There are no pictures, plans, or wartime documents dealing with gas chambers or any plan to exterminate the Jews during the supposed Holocaust. And we can't use the excuse that the Nazis destroyed all of that evidence, because after we broke the German codes, we were able to intercept their secret transmissions, including those from Auschwitz. There were no plans ever discussed, no numbers discussed, no techniques, no orders given. Zyklon B was in widespread use throughout Europe at the time for pest control, and it's found in all of the concentration camps, including those that are not said to have had gas chambers in them. Aerial photos taken of Auschwitz during the war show no signs of people being gassed, bodies being burned, or the stores of fuel that would be required to power the crematoriums. World War II lasted a total of 6 years. Assuming that Hitler started gassing Jews since day one, that makes for 3,153,600 minutes. 6 million Jews killed during 3,153,600 minutes comes out to 1.9 Jews per minute. That means Hitler killed roughly 1 Jew every 30 seconds. In Auschwitz, the most famous and biggest concentration camp, there are 15 crematoriums. According to Auschwitz survivors, Jews would go into the chamber, gassed for 15 to 20 minutes, then put into the oven. It takes 1 hour to cremate a body using modern furnaces, which operate at much higher temperatures than the traditional ovens at the camp. However, let us say that the ovens were operating at a level that we see today. That means it would take 1 hour, 20 minutes to gas and burn 15 Jews, assuming they were all burned simultaneously. This is, of course, disregarding the time it would take for the gas to empty the chamber, for the bodies to be transported from the chamber to the oven. The elevators used to transport bodies were very slow and could only take up 7 bodies at a time with their weight capacity. However, for our greatest ally, we're going to assume that the bodies were magically teleported instantly from chamber to oven as soon as they were deceased. That means 15 Jews were gassed and burned every 1.5 hours. That comes out to exactly 300 Jews every 24 hours. Assuming the gassing and burning of the Jews was happening every hour straight without stopping for 6 years on an uninterrupted basis, the total number of killed Jews would be 657,000 for those 6 years. The official tally is that 4 million Jews were killed at Auschwitz alone. Even at the other official story of 2.5 million, only then it adds up. But assuming for 3.1 million minutes of 24/7 gassing, that's way more than existed. Of course, we would need some time travel. Supposed gas chambers do not have gasketed doors. They do not have fireproof switches, bulbs, or wiring. The gas is flammable. And the inlets in the roof that are said to have been the point of introduction for Zyklon crystals were, according to senior officials, added after the war. Dr. Francis Piper, the senior curator and director of archives at the Auschwitz State Museum, admitted on camera to David Cole that Crema 1, the alleged gas chamber at Auschwitz main camp, was in fact a reconstruction built by the Soviets after the war under direct orders from Stalin. This includes the fake chimney that is not even connected to the crematorium. There's pictures of that. In 1988, an execution equipment expert, a gentleman named Luchter, who created the famous or infamous, perhaps, Luchter report, conducted forensic examinations of the gas chambers. He took samples from 4 chambers at Birkenau, the one at the main camp at Auschwitz, and a control sample from one of the disinfectant chamber. Not disinfectant. It's the disinfestation chambers that we know used Zyklon B. It was used to deal with the lice problem. The gas chamber showed almost no traces, whereas the disinfestation sample went literally off the scale. In 1990, the Institute for Forensic Research in Krakow attempted to refute these results, and their own tests came back with identical results. Denying the Holocaust, by the way, is a criminal offense, and it carries a prison sentence in several European countries. The Holocaust is the only event in history to be enforced by law, and it's the only conspiracy theory we'll talk about tonight that simply suggesting is literally against the law in 15 countries in Europe.
15 countries?
So there's really interesting points about that. Like, can I just pick that for a second? I don't want to.
No, you're not allowed.
No. I don't want to pick it one way or the other about like arguing against it, because I just want to pick at some of the principles of that, because there's a really cool part of that. So there's reciprocity at play there, right? There's the reciprocity element of this is it's a psychological persuasion technique, and part of this is you give up something small, and the kind of the impact of that is other people feel kind of, it's not obligated, but they feel that same response to also make some like kind of reciprocal.
What concession changes. Are you talking about? I think I might.
So part of what that statement is, it does a lot of like, okay, well, let's assume this scenario, and this scenario is too big, so we'll be, for example, the elevator stuff was a reciprocity thing. It's like okay, well, this would be super hard in this, but we'll assume that this element's not a problem, and it still has problems. And there's like 3 or 4 of those throughout that the reciprocity stuff that jumps out at me. Another one is the facts thing. It's really interesting, right? Because we've had this conversation before here. I think it's really hard to refute facts on camera without any, especially in real time, without some citation and the ability to actually examine that citation. You said a number of facts in that who knows if they're fucking facts one way or the other on that, right? And especially when you're doing things like the report from such and such an institution, again, like there's like an authority exchange there. You're being like,
yeah, I was gonna bring a citations page and a lot of links, but I thought that dragged the show down. Most of it checked out, unfortunately.
Huh. It's really cool to like, because you hear that and you're like, this is fairly persuasive, and I'm like, why is it persuasive? And it just, to me, like, going into that.
The like rhetorical devices used is interesting, definitely, but like, what about the actual content of what Kyle said? Like, I'm trying to think of, in fact, one thing I didn't know, that they said that 4 million Jews died just at Auschwitz. Is that right?
Yeah.
Just
one
at
of the interesting things, and I was going to expound upon that, was the varying number of Jews that supposedly died over the years at various camps. They began with the number 6 million, and that number 6 million goes back to like 1917, a publication in the New York Sun, where they were discussing the 6 million imperiled Jews in Europe. And then it throughout the years, that number was repeatedly used to describe how, and it's basically a number of how many Jews there were in Europe. Out of there were about 12 million in existence at the time, and there just weren't enough Jews there to get the number that they're suggesting from most of the stuff I've read. But the numbers for Auschwitz fluctuated rapidly between the years of like 1946 and the years like 1988. They kept fluctuating from anywhere from 350,000 to 4 million. Meanwhile, the total number killed was never changed. That was another point that I was going to make, but it was just a little weird to get around.
Okay.
What was that? What was the number you ended up saying for that presentation?
4 million is
right. So
it's like 2.5 to 4 million is the number that supposedly died at Auschwitz.
That's not of Jews though. That's of everyone, right, Kyle?
Jews.
So even like an immediate, like, for just like checking the facts, like, I understand this conspiracy theory, like, I don't think you believe that, blah blah blah, right? But like, just even interesting for that, right? Because it's like presented as facts in that, right? But like a 1 second Google search for literally how many Jews died at Auschwitz, like the first thing that fucking comes up is 1 million, like between.
Oh wait, you can't trust that filthy. That's part of the conspiracy,
right? Well, that's what I'm saying. But like the weaving of like numbers and sources in there, combined with non-factual information.
What was the number that you got to that like was feasible? Or I guess there wasn't like a feasible number because so many had
657,000.
And that was assuming like that like teleportation clause or whatever the fuck. Okay.
Yes, and always having enough fuel to run. They kept referring to a fuel it's coke, COKE, and it's some sort of a crematorium fuel that was used, and there would have had to have been enormous stockpiles of that on site at all times to like keep them running, and of course there would have been plumes of smoke in the aerial photographs taken by the Allies. And at the museum, they have those photographs blown up, the Auschwitz Museum, and then there aren't any clouds of smoke. So I guess that day in particular, they weren't running the crematoriums.
That's interesting.
That is interesting. I'm gonna have to Google more about this.
Really? You're tempted to Google more after that?
Well, I'm like looking to
Filthy
like
has
what
all
you
his
did,
questions
like,
answered.
like confirming and denying and shit.
But it's,
yeah,
I mean, it's so much more work to refute something than it is to accept the claim. Like this is something that
There are
you see
also
a lot.
no eyewitness testimonies of them that didn't come from either tortured Nazis or people who were really in no state to know what they saw, right? Because how could you see the gas chambers and live?
Did people say that they saw the gas chamber and lived?
I'm sure there were some that did. I mean, I did 6 hours of research here. I'm not a historian. It just seems to me that there's a lot. I think the Holocaust happened, but I think the number 6 million may be inflated.
Gas chamber survivor Holocaust. Let's see.
Jesus, let's hope this is not in the title of this PK, and hope that
it's
Filthy
in
Robot
there.
does not get associated with
This
this.
one on NBC says
Like,
Auschwitz survivor Gina Turgel walked out of gas chamber alive.
You wouldn't think they'd let her. She made it. Damn.
I think they didn't gas them
Yeah,
all
that's
too. Didn't they originally
odd.
shoot
It seems
them?
like
I think the shooting came later. It would be maybe.
I'm getting it off a movie. I remember them saying that this. I mean,
I hadn't thought about that, Kyle. Like, if you did escape the gas chamber, wouldn't they just go, "Oh, look, shoot that person"?
Yeah. I read a whole thing about how supposedly they use diesel, but they explained that diesel fumes would take so long to kill someone, and they basically said, look, these people were in coal burning locomotives, right, on a train being transported there. Why didn't they just pull the train into a tunnel and wait?
And wait, what do you mean? Oh, like with the
Like
fumes.
the- 68.
We've seen choo-choo trains, right? All that black smoke rolling out the top. If you just pulled that train into a tunnel and waited 30 minutes, now you got a train of dead people. You don't have to worry with the camp, with the apparatus, with all of the guards, with crematoriums, with gases, with gas chambers.
Now I gotta fucking Google a diesel tunnel. And trying to keep up with all this stuff.
But that's mine. I'm my job was to put forward.
Nobody's accusing you of anything. We know.
No, but they will. And my job was to put forward a conspiracy theory and support it as best I could. And I thought of that one early this morning. That one popped up to me, and I started doing a little bit of research online and watching some YouTube videos and took a few notes. And
Did you
then
come across any like clearly crackpot people?
there is a website that will pay you. They've got like a bounty for anyone who can like explain how it could have happened to get to those numbers feasibly, and they'll pay like $700 if you can write a paper explaining how the Holocaust as it's presented could be factual. I found that interesting. They also sell SS hats.
SS hats.
What a
So they
shock.
have like a merch shop.
I'm saying that's probably the sort of people we're describing here. You know,
The kind of people you'd probably notice in public, or maybe not. I have no idea.
we blend in well.
Well, that's interesting, Kyle. I think you did a very good job looking for a conspiracy theory and then presenting it very competently, the way we are supposed to present conspiracy theories. Woody, did you have any umbrage you took other than what you said?
Go to Germany
his?
now.
No. It Filthy nailed all of it, all the same points that I would have thought. Like you hear him do citations and numbers, and like I ran the math. The claims aren't even true. And then 1 second of Googling, it's like those aren't even the claims. You know, like
there's different claims. That's the thing. They bounce that number around so much. The number of Jews that died in Auschwitz changed so many times. I watched this video of how many times it changed, and it's like, well, shit. They said 350,000, and then they said 1 million, and then they said 1.1 million, and then it was 2.5, and then it was 4 million, and it's so, well, which number do we go off on? And like, how are they getting to these numbers? There was a 6-year period recently when they started allowing this online thing, where people can literally go online and look for mistakes in like the number of Holocaust victims there were, if it's a family member of something, and 1 million names were added, even though there aren't any records. That people just added 1 million names to the list. And like at the bottom of everything I read, that one of the persons made the argument, like, is it any worse that it was 6 million and not 1 million? Is it any better that it was 1 million and not 6 million?
Yeah, it's like 5 million better.
No, it's an atrocity both ways. Of course, it's better because the numbers are smaller or larger, but it doesn't make it
still a genocide. Yeah,
or any worse. It's still a horrible, disgusting, evil thing, whether it was 1 million that died or 6 million.
Now, Kyle. So it looks like Kyle might have been reading from an older source, because up until 1988, it looks like 4.1 million at Auschwitz was the claim,
sure, but
and then in
right?
1988 they said 1.1 million.
This reminds me of my first encounter on this show with a straw man argument of some sort, right? Where if you're putting up a figure that like you'd be like, oh, we can prove that this wasn't the figure, and everyone's like, well, we stopped claiming that was the figure 20 years ago. Like that's
30 years ago.
Yeah, sure, right.
31.
Yeah, that's clever. It's clever. It's interesting. It's like if you just like take that with no other like historical place to put that. Yeah, that sounds kind of legit. Like these numbers don't add up. I'm like, yeah, that's funny.
Well, it's one of those things like that's kind of
the
fun
numbers
of
still
the
don't add up, even with modern estimates as to how many died and they are estimates, of course, because where are they getting those numbers from, right? Where does the 1.1 million number come from? It's an estimate. They're guessing. Even that number is 40% too high for what could have possibly been done with the apparatus in place.
Trying to find it seems like an easy thing to do would be to find a census for before and after the war, right? But then you also remember a ton of Jewish people left for Israel in that around that same time, right?
Yeah,
and they left to other countries, so you wouldn't know.
That was one of the explanations. The number of Jews that fled.
Maybe I'm getting my history wrong. Wasn't Israel founded as a result around there?
It absolutely was.
Now, 48, I think.
Yeah. So how are they leaving for Israel?
Well, I mean, it's not like they said, and it's founded. Come on in! And then they open the gate. It's like you start with a population, and then it became a state.
Sure, but
this is how Israel works. First you move in, and then you claim it as your settlement, and then it becomes official.
That's exactly what happened. And the two reasons and the two explanations for why the Holocaust was dreamt up, if you will, were given as Soviet propaganda, obviously, to demonize the Germans. There's plenty of evidence of that. That's irrefutable. Not dealing with the Holocaust, but dealing with Soviet propaganda against Germans. Right? There's the classic photograph of the two German soldiers smiling, each with a goose under each arm, and there's a Jewish woman hanging from a lamppost behind them. Of course, that's a Photoshop, an old-timey Photoshop. They show the original, and they're just two happy Nazis with geese, like out on the street corner. And then the other one, of course, is to gain sympathy for Israel and amongst the international community to take the Palestinians land from them. Again,
every time, with any conspiracy theory, I always feel like there's too many. Well, not with any conspiracy theory, because there are some that like to deny that conspiracies happen is silly. Like people conspire to do things in secret all the time and they get away with it. But for really, really enormous ones, it's it seems like there would have to be so many people playing along, and they'd have to have so many records protected and or maybe destroyed or shit like that. That's always the limiting factor for me for any conspiracy that seems like there'd just be a critical mass of people that couldn't keep their mouth shut about it if it actually
I found it interesting that there weren't any records of anyone giving an order to exterminate the Jews.
And their explanation for that was that, well, we had cracked their code, and so if they had been sending it, we would have figured it out.
Well, that, and there weren't any records, secret or otherwise. No records were found that. I mean, I'm sure there were plenty of war plans that we found. Oh yeah, here's where he ordered Rommel to go to North Africa instead of the Western Front. All right, that's page 3. Oh, well, here's the whole thing about Operation Barbarossa. This is where he gave the order right here and decided to break his non-aggression pact with Stalin. He wanted that oil, huh? But there's not a page that says anything about the Holocaust as we know it, and even though we broke their secret code, and we were intercepting all of their secret communications. Everything from their weapons shipments to Japan to their defense strategies in the around Normandy. I don't know. I found it was an interesting read, and it was an interesting bit of research to do. I definitely think the Holocaust happened, though.
I'm glad you got that out.
I want to visit Germany someday.
Yeah.
I watched this one documentary.
Could you not? If people thought you were being serious?
Dude, there's this one part where they're interviewing this Catholic bishop or priest or something like that. He's an older white guy, maybe 60 years old, and they ask him about it, and he's like, "Oh, I don't believe it happened in the numbers that are suggested. I clearly believe that this, and that happened, but 6 million is just far too much." And then he pauses and he goes, "I hope you're not trying to bait me, because here in Germany I could be arrested for this." And then at the bottom, like, text pops up, "He was arrested," and then like sentenced to it was either a fine or something like that, and then later commuted. But then at one of the videos, there's a whole list of scrolling text of all of the people who have been arrested and the years that they've spent in prison for denying the Holocaust.
Wait, how many years was it? Was it like
some of them was 12 months? Some was 6 or 7 years.
Was that the intro for Taylor's conspiracy theory right there? How many years have been spent behind bars denying Holocaust?
It's hundreds, I would say. Some of them spent 6-7 years in prison because of it.
That is a long time in prison.
Yeah, it was the Swiss seemed pretty aggressive with their sentences in particular.
That's interesting. It is odd that you can be imprisoned for like talking about any kind of historical, event.
No, there's plenty of free speech in Europe unless you talk about that subject.
I've heard this before though, because I have a fair number of German viewers, and I've heard this broached before, and I actually thought it was kind of an interesting way of doing this. This is like their country's way of being like, we're not going to try to sweep this under the rug or deny this. We're going to teach and educate about this, and this is a requirement of our education to talk about this, and we're not going to allow stuff like this to happen again. So these things are banned, and you're not allowed to deny this shit happened. You can't do this, and it's deliberate on a policy level to make that a thing.
Well, it's definitely deliberate,
but it's in many other countries, right? Switzerland, it doesn't really.
Is it really 15? That's another one of those facts. Let's look that up.
It used to be 15 at least, because I saw the number 15 3 different times.
How many countries is Holocaust denial illegal?
Wait, did you say I saw the number 15 3 times? Therefore, it's a fact.
I don't mean that I just saw it randomly displaced in an article. I mean, it was
okay. As of 2013, there were 17 countries, and Italy was looking to thinking about joining, according to UPI.com.
So yeah, that one's mine. That's the one I came up with. I looked at a bunch of conspiracy theories, and none of them really grabbed me, and none of them were really as controversial as that one. Right? That one really breaks people down a line. There are people who think that the Holocaust did not happen are over there, and the people who know it did are over here, and there is no mixing the streams. Right? So I liked that one a lot. I thought it would be a good one to do. What'd you do, Taylor?
Well, mine has something to do with gas as well, except it's in the modern day. So mine is about Bashar al-Assad, who is the leader of Syria, the elected leader of Syria. And the reason that it jumped out to me is we all know how divisive the media is and how much like Fox and MSNBC hate each other. Like, it's rare that a story will break and that everyone will be